we don't have an ability to see past things in a literal way. So we're in the mountain. It's the symbol of seeing far beyond everything, which is special. It's a special experience.
Welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Christina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of Soror Mystica. We are here today to discuss with you the symbol of the mountain. And we are getting together to talk about this at a time that is very exciting to me because Mariana has been away on a long pilgrimage trip, in which I found it extremely unbearable that she was now 8 hours farther from me than she normally is. And so her trip ruined my life, even though we were texting the whole time. And that is why I'm happy that we're recording now, because we're back on this podcast together and everything is correct again. So thank you, Mariana, for doing that. And yeah, welcome back. You're still settling in to your life.
I don't know where I am or where I live or who I am or what my name is, but that's all the things. That's okay. That's what happens when you come back from a long trip. You're like, why is this my life? How did I end up here? Not in bad ways, just kind of like, ooh. So, but I am very happy to be back and available to voice note you at any time now, rather than trying to find a quiet corner where the French won't smack me for voice noting you on a train. That'll be good.
That would be good. Yeah. So yeah, we're back to business. And the business is talking about mountains. So before we do that, for those of you who are listening, who are curious about the symbols in the planets and signs in astrology, I'm going to be teaching a class in July called Mythology for Astrologers. You don't have to be an astrologer to take this class. It is just to orient students, anybody who's curious, to the specific mythic symbols and stories behind the 12 signs and the 7 traditional planets. And I'm doing this out of my own desire to consolidate this information, which is very vast, but also to help people be able to begin to bring in specific imagery for the planets and the signs that is mythologically oriented. Because a lot of times astrologers, especially if they have an archetypal lens, will talk about mythology and astrology together, like they just obviously knit together. But for a lot of people, it's not that simple to connect sign to story. So we're going to be doing exactly that. It is a 4-week class. The syllabus is all on my website, which is christinafarella.com, or linked in the show notes. And yeah, registration is open for another several weeks. We start on July 26th, and I cannot wait to begin. So please join me if you feel called by this invitation.
Yeah, this one is going to be so good because I really like how I think that a lot of us feel like, oh, I'm supposed to know this already, right? There's like this gap in knowledge of like, well, I don't even know what to research. I don't even know how to start to piece this together.
We're going to have a reading list. We're reading Ovid. We're reading Robert Gray. We're reading like different mythic stories together so that people have a context and it's not just someone telling them a story without a source. So we're going to get Virgo-y in this class.
I love it. It's going to be, it sounds like it's going to be so good. And then blending all of that into bringing that symbolic depth into the astrology work and not just making astrology about like memorization and details.
It helps it come alive. So I'm thrilled.
It's going to be so good.
Okay, great. So I would love to know what you're reading, or if you feel like sharing this time, since you did just have a very mystical trip, sharing like some kind of image or something with listeners.
Yeah. Well, I'm not reading anything new. I did have a 28-hour or whatever travel home day where I finished the entirety of that book by Cynthia Bourgeault, Mary Magdalene something something, don't remember the exact title, but the book about Mary Magdalene. So I read like 150 pages of that in a day, which was a lot of reading in a day. So that was really excellent. I think that, well, I was just talking to you about this. I think that one of the things that's been really interesting and so delightful is like I got to see a few Black Madonnas, and the way that they worship them and care for them. I was in Provence. They literally have entire like societies dedicated to these Black Madonnas. They really take such good care of these icons, and they like have parades where they'll like hold them up, and they'll like have special dresses commissioned from like South America, and like it's just wild the way that they care for them. So I'm completely immersed in images and icons and goddess vibes, and just want to go live in Provence now and drink rosé. They have so much rosé. I think I had at least the equivalent of like 6 bottles of rosé. And like
This is acceptable. You are
yeah, it
allowed.
was a lot. It was a lot of rosé. It was really really yummy. But I'm still in the floaty weird where am I mode. And very excited to read some stuff. I just ordered the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, which if you don't know what that is, you can Google it. And it's basically like a long lost gospel attributed to Mary Magdalene, which I just found out about. So we have the Gospel of Mary, which is also attributed to her. But this is another thing that's been kept secret for a couple thousand years. So it's just how Dan Brown. I mean, it's so exciting.
That's so funny. Yeah, I'm excited for you, and I'm glad that you're back. And I know that a lot of interesting creative things are going to come from everything that you absorbed on your trip.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for you.
Thanks.
So that's great. I'm reading a lot of things right now. I am making my way through Edward Edinger's Ego and Archetype.
How are
but
you liking it?
I like it. I
I
like it so
love it.
far.
I love
Yeah.
that one. Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in what is being explored, and I like really had to think about the distinction that he makes between the ego and the self for like many minutes, and before I was like, okay, I get it. So it's good for my mind to be stretching in this way, but I'm only about 30 pages in, but I'm sitting with it daily, and I really like it. You did a whole reading class.
I did a class on it, where there was like a focused reading group only on that book, and like there's just pages of like breaking down with like graphs the ego self axis. So it's like totally. It's really, you really have to sit and contemplate that for a long time.
It's trippy,
but it's good. It has more than that in it too. That's
yes, I know it's going to go, and I know I like got to some stuff about the Garden of Eden, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain. So I'm really, really fascinated. But yeah, I also just read the saddest novel ever, and I don't recommend it to anybody, but I really loved it. It's called The Door, and it's by this Hungarian author, Magda Szabo, and it was written in the 80s, and it's just this account of a woman who happens to be an academic, and she's married to an academic, and she hires a woman to be their housekeeper, and it takes place in some little tiny town in Hungary, and this woman housekeeper and her just have this insanely intense relationship, and so it's about getting to know this very mysterious, seemingly super capable housekeeper woman, and then learning about her vulnerabilities and her story, and the kind of like just the clashing of like an older woman and a younger woman, but it's not mother-daughter relationship. And the ending is just so brutal. And I knew it was going to be brutal because that's what the book told. It said that on the back. All the blurbs are like, this book haunts me, some author. Like everybody feels this way apparently about it. But it was well written and really, really moving. And I was just totally hooked. And I have not read a lot of novels in the past several years. I've been very immersed in poetry and myth, and then like essays and stuff. So I'm on a novel kick now. So I'm
Yeah.
excited
Well, I love it.
about that.
Yeah, that sounds really good. You'll have to
Mhm.
remind me of that
Yeah, I'm
later.
sure you would
I'll
like
read it.
it.
I'm
It's
sure I would like it.
totally upsetting. So
Yeah, I love
it's in
it
our
when it's
wheelhouse.
upsetting. Yeah.
Okay,
It's not
cool.
upsetting. Why do you bother?
That's
Uh,
the power of having Scorpio placements in a friendship. If it's not depressing, why talk about it? So
um,
good.
yeah.
Here we are. All right. So I want to talk about the mountain because this is just such a potent symbol. I'm always really drawn to nature imagery. I mean, we both are, but I'm excited to contend with something that is extant in the real visible world that
Mm,
also has highly mystical components to it. I think
yeah.
another episode that we've touched on around this would be our rose episode, was talking
Yes.
about an actual plant. But we've been talking about, the Soror Mystica herself. We've talked about the path of individuation, dreaming, etc. And now we're back in the realm of the earth. And I think that that's exciting. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just get us started from the perspective of a handbook on symbols that I have. And we'll kind of use that to get the engine revved. What a weird metaphor. Okay. The cosmic mountain is the world center and omphalos. I want to come back to that word. And omphalos, through which the polar axis runs and round which glide the dragons of cosmic power. The highest point of Earth is regarded as central, the summit of paradise, the meeting place in the clouds of heaven and earth, reaching up on high. As axial and central, it provides passage from one plane to another and communion with the gods. It is also the support and abode of the gods. It is the embodiment of cosmic forces and life. The rocks are bones, the streams blood, the vegetation hair, and the clouds are breath. Totally weird. The mountain, and weird in a good way, the mountain symbolizes constancy, eternity, firmness, and stillness. Mountaintops are associated with sun, rain, and thunder gods, and in early traditions, the feminine godhead. The mountain was the earth and female, with the sky, clouds, thunder, and lightning as the fecundating male. On the spiritual level, mountaintops represent the state of full consciousness. Pilgrimages up sacred mountains symbolize aspiration, renunciation of worldly desires, attaining to the highest states, and ascent from the partial and limited to the whole and unlimited. And so it goes on. There's one more image here that says, the sacred mountain is also the navel of the waters, and that's navel like belly button, since the fountain of all waters springs from it. And it talks about how in Christian art, there are 4 rivers that issue from the sacred mountain and the throne of God, which in the Jungian art perspective would create probably a mandala with the mountain at the
Yeah.
center and
Yeah.
the 4 rivers shooting out. So that is so rich and jogs the imagination, pulls us in many different directions, and that is where we're starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, that symbols book is really good. They do a good job of
Mm-hmm.
giving us so many touchstones. I think that the reason mountains kind of came up as a possibility is that on this pilgrimage I made a trek up a mountain to see the grotto that Mary Magdalene is said to have died in. And that was a really cool journey. I mean, I've not like a mountain climber, but like I've done some hikes up mountains before. It's not, I've done that, but this was different because I had a destination. And there was something I was going to see, and um, it was definitely a more difficult hike than I anticipated it was, because the person who led the pilgrimage was like, it's just a steep walk, and I was like, I wish I wore a sports bra. It's not just a steep walk. That was a lot. And so it was this long hour and a half trek up this mountain, and then there's just this enormous cave that's been turned into a chapel. and it was so exquisite, and you could really feel the power of this place. And we didn't do this, but then there is another possibility to go even farther up the mountain to the very top, the very peak of it. So after preaching in Provence for however many years, she decided to retreat and become a hermit, and kind of just spend the rest of her life contemplating God. And so she went into this cave, and the way that she was fed was that she apparently climbed to the very peak every day, and then the angels lifted her up into heaven and fed her manna, and then like dropped her back down on the top of the mountain, and then she'd go back to her cave. So we didn't go all the way up there, but you could see it as you were like approaching it, this little tiny chapel right at the top of this mountain. It was very cool. So I think that, that was something that the Symbols book kind of referenced, the journey up the mountain to get the spiritual food, or to go to meet the gods. And that is something that is really significant about the mountain as a symbol, is that there is, first of all, the effort of the climb. We have to kind of get off the base ground and make our way up into the realm that belongs to the ether, right, to the godly plane. And I don't remember exactly what the route was, but the guide who was with us said that the name of that chapel that was at the very top of the mountain I think it came from the Provençal word meaning the liminal space between heaven and earth. And so that was literally what that space was. And so the mountain really does feel like it is that liminal space between the total realm of the gods, where there is no human, and the total realm of the human, where the gods don't really live. They don't really, coexist with humanity on the earth itself. So those are the first thoughts in my brain.
I love that. And I have a question. So the chapel of Saint Python, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Does that have like a Python connection? Like, how's that spelled?
It is spelled, I'll look it up for you right now. It's because it's not an actual saint.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saint as in sacred. So it was Pylon.
Pylon. Okay.
Pylon. Pilon.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was wrong about the th.
Okay.
But
never mind.
There it is.
Okay, cool.
Pylon.
Yeah, the only reason I asked was because if it's like the word Pythia, the oracle, or Python, just the snake, it just has that oracular quality to it. And Mary Magdalene is like,
that would have been very cool.
Yeah, but no.
Someone saw a snake on the way up the mountain or down the mountain. Isn't that cool?
Very cool. I'm jelly.
I saw a snake.
Yeah.
I saw a goddess in a tree though. I'll send you that picture.
Oh, please do. Thank you.
Yeah. She had all the body parts in the right places.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, this is great. We're already
tangenting
off topic. Okay. So I think that, the idea of the ascent is right. So like there are a few different things that coexist with mountain as like a symbol or a caveat or a detail. There's the ascent, there's the peak, the summit, and then there's the descent too, which can be as difficult as going up. I mean, you and I walked up a butte here in my town, and that was like, for some reason, very hard.
As I was there, I'm convinced I make it hard.
It was hard. But when you get to the top of a mountain or any high place, you do have this sense of like exhale.
Yeah.
If the air isn't too thin, if you're not too high up, and you do have this sense of like not omniscience, but like that sort of 360 panoramic view that you get at the top of a high point does make you feel closer to the divine than to the human realms, which is really, really beautiful. And so, in myth, obviously the most famous mountain is the Mount Olympus in Greece. There are many mountains in the world. It's not the only important mountain at all, but it comes up a lot in the stories that I use in my work. And so that is an important place. I also think that the cave being the place where Mary Magdalene passed away is interesting. I was thinking about how Orpheus's decapitated head floated down a river and eventually washed up shore, up a mountain into a cave where it prophesied day and night until Apollo made it be quiet. So there are always these echoing symbols of like the voice of God or the voice of the prophet, the echo probably,
Mm-hmm.
and the cave, the mountain, the summit, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, one of like the cool, I would just probably pop culture instances of mountain-ness is Hodorowski's movie, The Holy Mountain, which
Mm-hmm.
I 1,000% recommend. It's a little gross in parts. There's like a lot of, there's like some gore, but it's surrealism gore. It's not really scary. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't handle any gore. So if I like
Yeah, I
this
was gonna
movie,
say it's probably not that bad
it's
because
fine. No,
your
it's art
threshold is
gore.
yeah.
My threshold is at the bottom. I can't. I'm too sensitive. So yeah. Um, anyway, it's about this kind of ascent to the top of a mountain where an alchemist leads this group of people who have been lured to this place. And I think that there are 7 of them, and they're each connected to a different planet. And so when
Mm,
we get to know the characters of that film, one of the women is like, I am from the planet Mars and I make artillery, and it's like about her life as this like arms dealer. It's very strange. And so each of these characters has a different set of experiences, and as they ascend the mountain, each of them has to confront their own fear or their own shadow, and literally are put into traumatizing situations where they shed clothes or they shave their heads or they're like,
oh,
burning their money. Like it's really, really, it's a little over the top, but it's great.
mm-hmm.
And they finally get to the top, and I won't ruin it, but it's beautiful, and it's also really intense to watch. Like you feel like you're climbing with them, and it's a struggle to get to the top. So I think that that's the other important thing about mountainness, is that it's not an easy thing to
Yeah.
access. It's something that's remote and purposely dangerous. How many people die climbing Mount Everest every year for God
Oh my
knows what
God.
reason? Yeah.
Yeah. That was this mountain where Mary Magdalene was called Mount Saint Baume, and it has the main path that you walk is called the Chemin de la Roi, meaning the path of the kings. And so the kings of France, when they were trying to have children, would
Mm-hmm.
go up this path, and it was this very difficult journey, and that was part of the thing for them, is that they would, you know, they would go through the effort, even being kings who are used to their French pleasure and comfort. Um, they would make this trek, and that is a really important point of the mountain, is that it's meant to be a trek to get to the top. If it's easy, then it really wasn't worth it. The point
Mm-hmm.
is that you struggle. I'm thinking of in tarot, there's a lot of mountains in tarot cards. We see that theme come up over and over again. Um, and the one that I like the most, and it's not clear that it's a mountain, but I think it depends how you kind of look at the card, but the Hermit looks like he's at the top of a mountain. He's on a snow-peaked mountain, and the snow is like sort of this symbol of isolation, also purity, challenge, having to kind of confront the cold and the wet. um, and the hermit is there alone, and so we can imagine that his path has been one of intense struggle to get to this peak, and yet he's arrived there. And we know that the hermit points to solitude, yes, but he also points to the experience of awareness of the heart and the soul, and the it's not really enlightenment as it is a deep intimacy with the introverted experience of yourself without all the stuff of the world to distract us. And so I like that image of it too, that he's old too. So we get this image, or this hint that he's been doing this a long time, and that he's gained a lot of wisdom from this struggle. And so that's a layer coming in for me in terms of that. I also think that with the mountain, we're talking about this kind of, as we're saying, the ascent, and I'm thinking a little bit about Dante too,
Mm-hmm.
and the climbing of the mountain We have like, there's like mountains kind of like scattered around in terms of like how his breakdown of hell and purgatory and heaven is. There's different variations of mountain, but the mountain of purgatory is very interesting in terms of these terraces and these realms of ascent, and how we kind of have to like one step at a time or one level at a time rise to this peak where, as you said, we can kind of get this vantage point of being able to see things with clarity. We're above our earthly lives in a way. I don't know. That's just something interesting that I'm thinking of.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that considering the height, I think that another quality of mountain-ness is centrality. When you're on
Mm-hmm.
top of a mountain, you feel like everything radiates out from you equidistant, and you can see the world in that way. And so, one of the words that came up in that
Yeah.
symbols list was omphalos, and
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I get weirdly excited to talk about. So now I'm going to relate it
It's a
to
good word.
the mountain. It's a great word. So, omphalos it's a Greek word. It just means navel or center. And it is an important word for the Greeks because they believed that certain holy spots, probably just one actually, was the omphalos of the world. And so for them, it happened to be this massive underground fire temple where
Mm.
the Temple of Vesta was. So the Temple of Vesta, the hearth goddess, was worshipped as a heap of burning coals that was
Mm.
always lit, sometimes flaming, sometimes just smoldering. And they just believed that the place where they decided to dig that ditch and make that holy site was the omphalos, or the center of the world. What I think is most potent about that, though, is that it has this connotation with like the navel or the belly button, aka this umbilical cord connection with the divine mother and the child, or
Yeah.
whatever that breakdown is. And so having the mountain be an omphalos as well, it's interesting. Like the Temple of Vesta example is like concave.
Mm-hmm.
Mountains are convex. It's
Good
like
job.
fifth grade science right there. And so, there is obviously this kind of phallic component maybe to a
Mm-hmm.
mountain as it
Yeah.
protrudes. But, beyond that, I think that the life-giving, life-sustaining nature of the navel of the omphalos is really, really interesting. So even if a mountain is just an energy center that people
Yeah.
go to be lifted up to meet the divine, that's very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about mountain gods, Zeus is the one that comes to mind first and foremost. And we have, weather that seems to cascade down from mountaintops, and avalanches can come from the mountaintop. And, so I guess I'm curious about what a psychological read of a mountain would
Mm-hmm.
be. Or before we got on, we were also talking about the mountain as an obstacle. And so I wonder if we can open the door in that direction a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. That's in the lovers card. There's a big mountain in between them in the background, and different people have different reads on that because it's so prominent. Some people think that it's a big phallus. I'm just a little
Everyone's a
bit,
second grader all the time.
you know. Who was it? I saw someone was like, "It's a big phallus, like a volcano ready to erupt." And I'm like, "Ew, ew."
I find
Um,
volcanoes very feminine, though. I don't know why.
yeah, yeah, I can see that because it's like there's, I don't know, it's like dark
Yeah.
earth,
Yeah.
hot,
Gushing.
moist,
Mhm.
weird. Yes, I can see it, but I don't know. I don't. That's not necessarily my take on it. I personally think that the mountain in the background of the lovers card reminds us that this is a path of spiritual enlightenment, because that, I really do think that that's what the mountain often points us toward. But then there's other takes that say it's the obstacle between the two of them, right? So there's this mountain that they both have to cross or ascend or kind of get over to really see the other. Even though it's in the background, it's kind of this symbolic like divide between them. And I think that's also a really powerful perspective of the mountain being this, I mean, like just look at it the world geographically, geologically. Like the mountain is the thing that cannot be crossed, which is why we have some of the places in the world, like China versus India, that have their cultures stayed, even though they're fairly close geographically, they stayed pretty separate because they had the Himalayas to cross in order to kind of cross over these cultures. That was a really big obstacle that prevented that. Any good fantasy writer knows that they have to have a really big mountain range somewhere in order to explain how the world is different places. It's really important. So I think that there is this level to it, obviously, of being the impassable. And so when we're navigating a mountain or a mountain range, we have to find the pass through. We have to wander a little bit until, I mean, this is, as you said before we got on, isn't there a mountain in Lord of the Rings? And there is. There is Mount Doom. But then there's also this really cool point in the third book where they're trying to cross this mountain range to get from one area to closer to Mordor. And so Aragorn and the companions have to go find a mountain pass, and there's only one open pass, and it's the Pass of the Dead. And there's like this dead army that's haunting this mountain pass, and it's just you have to go through it. There's no other way. That's the point. Is like you can't find another way through. You have to take the pass that's available. And so there's like, it's like a reiteration of that phrase that we always say, the only way out is through. Right. Yep. So that's kind of the thing that the mountain forces us to realize.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that maybe symbolically, in terms of thinking about encountering a mountain in our own lives, maybe it's something that presents itself as a seemingly insurmountable challenge. And I think that what we are often intimidated by, even things that we can see kind of far off in the distance of like, oh, in 2 years, I'm really going to have to deal with this thing that's been not dealt with yet. It's often, yes, the struggle of the ascent. And then when we get to the heart of it or the top of it or through it and we're in the center of it, we do have some kind of realization of like, you know, the fact that this is extremely worthwhile as a problem to solve, as a problem to surmount, climb, and accessing the wisdom that's in that issue in the mountain itself is really, really just important for what we carry with us back down into the real world, so to speak. And maybe in astrological terms, the Saturn return is a good example of our first big mountain that we encounter. And I even like the idea of that because we have 3 hits of Saturn in our Saturn return, all outer planet transits. I mean, planetary retrogrades will usually have us doing things in 3s. And so we have the first activation of Saturn as it crosses our natal Saturn. Saturn will go retrograde, hit it again. That's usually like the apex piece. And then we'll have the final hit of Saturn as it moves direct past the planet. So we have this like trifold experience that very crudely can be mountainish. But I do think that it is connected. So surmounting these obstacles to access the wisdom or even just the perspective that's at the top of them. This is how we learn and grow, is by doing stuff that scares us a lot and going through a mountain pass that's haunted by a dead army. That feels like therapy. That feels like something.
So good.
Yeah.
They do it so well in the movie, in the extended version, of course.
I love your love for Lord of the Rings. I read all the books.
Okay. Have you ever like actually sat down and watched the whole thing?
It's one of those movies that my dad would put on like around Christmas for what I don't know why it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I see why, but because it's like family, love, friendship.
Yeah.
One day we will have to do it.
We can do a marathon.
Yeah, well, my husband and I do it usually once a year, sometimes twice a year. And each one is about 4.5 hours, the extended.
Yeah.
4 hours.
I've never seen an extended one, but
we only watch the extended. Yeah. Because we're serious. Serious people. It's so good. I love it. But yes, we will do that one day. We did that with our other friends one time, and they were just like, why are we here? They were very cute and tried to be very supportive, but they fell asleep.
Oh, I won't fall asleep.
Fairly early.
I'll watch it. I promise.
Okay.
That's very funny.
That's okay. It's not for everyone. But yeah, I was thinking of the idea of the obstacle. I went to Switzerland last year, and we went to the top of Jungfrau, which is I think it's supposed to be the tallest mountain in Europe, in the Alps. When you get to the top of it, it's kind of wild because, I'm on the East Coast here in New York, and we have mountain ranges, but they're they're not much in terms of you see them, and you could very easily kind of do a hike that goes up there, and it's not that arduous. So that there is this kind of getting over, especially if you're in the Hudson Valley or something, you end up having to drive really high up in these mountain paths or in the Catskills or something, and you can get through it. But when I went there was this thing of oh no, there is no getting over this mountain. This mountain is enormous. And so I was thinking of Jung. I know saw this mountain and interacted with this mountain since it was in his country that he lived. And he believed that the mountain symbolized the essence of God. That when we are encountering the mountain, we are encountering the closest thing that we have on this earthly plane to what God is. God meaning simply the divine experience, right? The experience of something bigger than us. Because it is so mysterious and huge. And it just, being at the top of Jungfrau is when you look down, you don't see Earth anymore. All you see is more mountain, because you're just too high, and it's just too far away. And so there is this quality there of being there was this feeling of I'm in the wrong place. Don't belong here. This is beyond what I'm supposed to be able to see with my human eyes. And so it does really it does offer this quality of surpassing the mortal experience and giving us, as you were saying, when we went to the top of the butte, giving us this perspective that allows us to zoom way out of our very limited human brain, that can only see things from this plane of what's right in front of me. We don't have an ability to see past things in a literal way. So we're in the mountain. It's the symbol of seeing far beyond everything, which is special. It's a special experience.
Yeah, totally. It is special. And I think that it's something that's captivated artists for ages, obviously, and humans in general. And, I think that in terms of going out to meet God, one thing that I think of, and I don't really know if this was a God experience for him, but the painter Paul Cézanne painted Mont Sainte-Victoire, which is a mountain in Provence where you just were, 250 times or more. And he was just famous for every single day doing the same thing, going out into the fields in the hot Provençal sun and trying to get different views of this mountain. And you can tell if you're looking at a Cézanne version of Mont Sainte-Victoire in a museum, he would overpaint when he would get frustrated. And so some of the mountains are very black in terms of their pigmentation. And it's not because they're old or got dirty or something or burned. They do look like they're singed, but he would just keep working it and keep working it. And it's really interesting to think about the obsession with the mountain and what was the mountain holding for him. And, Cézanne obviously launched all of modernist painting by being one of the first people to render forms of nature into geometric forms that were, probably part of a sacred language that's just more ancient, more essential. And so I'm sure that I can dig up a good Cézanne quote on Mont Sainte-Victoire, but, we say that he painted it 250 times, but probably more because...
I think they said... because when we were on the bus driving,
they told
hotel, it was there, and it's very beautiful. It's actually quite white. The mountain itself is actually very white. It's I think pure limestone or something. And She said something like 320 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that the more scholarship and restoration they do on his canvases, the more they find them in underpaintings
Yeah,
of
and he
things that
painted
also
over it. Yeah.
exist. Yeah. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very, they really love Cezanne in Provence,
Of course.
obviously. They
Yeah.
talk about him a lot. And there's on that drive from where they picked us up to the hotel, there's the stretch of the highway that they call like Cezanne's Road or something,
Mhm.
because before it was a highway,
He probably
it
walked
was,
there.
he walked
Yeah.
that path every day, and he would like, our guide said that he especially with the mountain, he never would, start the sketch or whatever and bring it back to the studio and finish it. He
Mhm.
had to do it. He had to do it live. So he would walk this path every morning at like 3 o'clock in the morning or something and wait for the sun to begin to rise so he could
Yeah.
grab it. That is love.
It
That
is.
is
It's
love.
devotion to the exclusion of his family, his children, and his wife, by the way, but he painted them too, so I guess it's fine. But
Well,
it's fine. I'm not going to besmirch him. I love him, and he's
that's
a
okay.
genius. It's fine.
When I was at the Jung house, and they were talking about all the miraculous things that Jung did and all the books he read and all the things he was working on. I asked them, when did he have time to visit his children and to sit with his children? And they were like, oh, sometimes.
Never.
Like, okay, so and he
It's
had like 4 or 5 of them. He had a bunch.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thinking too of the mountain as something that we visit regularly, and thinking
Mm-hmm.
about like the chapel of Mary
Yeah.
Magdalene, having caves and sacred places kind of in the interior of the mountain is really interesting to me. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I'm pretty sure that at least in some medieval fairy tales that I cannot remember, there's like gold and dragons
Oh yeah,
inside of
in the base of
mountains.
the mountain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
I mean they have that. That's the whole dwarf
Yes,
lore
that's what I'm thinking
of
about.
like,
It is a
yes,
Tolkien thing.
it is. Well, Tolkien took that from the Norwegian Vikings. And the
Okay.
Vikings had the. I mean, it's when you really study Tolkien, you realize that he didn't make up anything.
Yeah.
He just took it from all over the place.
Nothing new under the sun, as they
Mm-mm.
say. Mhm.
But yeah, so that comes from Norse mythology. The
Mhm.
dwarves that were gold workers, and they lived in the mountains, and they lived in the bottom of it though, which is
But that's
really,
cool. I think it's
yeah.
interesting. So we have this high low. So even in the earthiest part of it, there is this wealth that's like the foundation of whatever is at the top. So I wonder
Hmm.
too if there's like a distinction to be made between the airy divine at the top and then like
Yeah.
the earthy wealth at the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah.
That feels like
The
something.
rock the
Hmm.
rock people at the bottom. Yeah, I mean that's where the dragon will live. If there is a dragon hiding in a cave, that's Smog is the dragon in the Hobbit that
Yep.
lives in the base of the mountain and hoards the gold. And um yeah, that's it's a very different distinction, and there's probably something about that being a metaphor between our base desire
Yeah.
and our spiritual desire, and kind of separating those two experiences.
Hmm.
um but yeah, it is, there is a lot of like in Lord of the Rings. Moria is a basically a dwarf city in a mountain, and so they dug too deep, they mined too deep in the mountain, and they released this creature called the Balrog, and it's this demon creature that had been trapped in the base of the mountain. And so there is also something about the mountain having its roots that stretch, like it becomes the earth and it's deep in the earth.
Yeah.
And there's something scary about that, because then you're getting into hell.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm getting spooked. I need to stop talking about hell.
That's good. So yeah, no hell, no hell today, tomorrow. No, I love that the depth I think is so important as well. We think about height when we think about mountains, but one of the
Mhm.
words that came up in that symbols kind of paragraph that I shared at the beginning was the idea of stillness and
Yeah.
firmness. And
Yeah.
I do think that there is this obviously isn't that a phrase that people say, like, if I could move mountains for you, I would, or
Hmm.
something like that? It's an
Yes.
impossible task unless it's an act of nature or God that there's like an avalanche or some kind of earthquake that opens a mountain up.
Yeah.
But there
But
is
even so,
this,
they're
yeah.
immortal.
Yes. And so the place where we go to have this ascent is a place of great danger, but it is also essentially still and firm and ready to kind of help us maybe reach
Mm-hmm.
that higher place of awareness and connection with the divine.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is the thing about mountains that's unique to every. It's distinct from every other feature of the earth is that it does not change. I mean, forests change, obviously, seas change, the ground changes, everything shifts, but mountains, they don't. They
Yeah.
don't even. They don't even. It's not even like they grow either. It's not like, over time they somehow accumulate taller. Like it's not possible. They're
Well,
just there.
aren't they created from a pushing up of
Mm-hmm.
tectonic plates,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But then they're kind of like as is
Yeah.
once that's kind of complete. That was one of the crazy things about the mountains in Provence is that I have to do some research about how it happened, but they literally look like they just kind of these two plates slammed into each other and just one side of it got thrust upward, and because when it literally looks like someone took a paintbrush and just drew a straight line across the sky and then just filled it in down
Weird.
because it's just straight. There's no peaks. These mountains are just these very, very straight kind of, and then there's like little spots where maybe it'll be a bit more jagged and a bit higher, but never seen mountains like that before. And it was crazy. And we were surrounded by them on all sides when we were like drive to whatever place we were going to. And that was really special too. To feel like there's something wild and rugged about the earth that's untouchable by our stupid human hands. That was cool to see because I live in the dumb city. So I'm like, I don't know, I just get very excited about a mountain. It excites me to see one. I get like, oh my
You and
goodness.
everybody else in history. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many, stories about mountains that are important to us. And when I was thinking about like art history examples, I was thinking again of Vasily Kandinsky and his
Mhm.
Blau Reiter school, which
Mhm.
is the Blue Rider. And they were these, post-impressionist. They called themselves the Fauves in some of their writings, or they were just like people who were wild men and they were painting nature and communing with God. But there are many important paintings of people riding horses climbing a mountain. Marc Chagall, also
Mhm.
adjacent to this group, painted the Blue Mountain many times. And so there's just like in so much of art, and those actually, I should finish that thought, those artists in particular, the circle around Kandinsky was very interested in God and spirituality from a
Mhm.
mystical standpoint. They weren't Christian. They were like reconnecting with nature in a way that was breaking from the kind of norms and expectations of the developing world. And so that is, when I think about mountains in art history, I think of Cezanne first, and then I think of
Mhm.
Kandinsky and his pals second. I'm sure there are many other examples. Picasso and Braque also painted many mountains, and whatever. Everyone loves mountains, so it's fine.
Everyone
But
loves mountains.
but it is because of what it symbolizes, that the visible representation of something that is so big. It's kind of like standing in front of the ocean or standing in front of a
Mhm.
very old tree or a very old forest or something like that. That expanse is what is most intimidating and most inspiring at the same time. So we feel our smallness, but we can also see it. So it's special, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's beautifully put. And that's kind of like we've had a really good conversation of kind of wandering around and just plumbing what's possible, talking about mountains. And I think what sounds like we're settling on, at least between us, is that it is the visual representation of what is untouchable and unmasterable in human life, and that it is this kind of image of the hugeness of the world, and that in some way that is God, or some way that is the divine experience of kind of touching in with this hugeness, and that there is our goal sometimes is just the humble climb, or the humble approach. And we can't live up there, though. We can't actually be hermits and just sit in the snow and be in the that experience forever. We kind of have to come back down with it and come back to the earth and hold on to what we've learned. So those are maybe my final thoughts on some mountain inspirations.
Beautiful. I love it. So let's turn to a symbol together.
Yes. If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Patreon, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us.
Moon Magic is a spiritual wellness center located in northern New Jersey, and owner Karen Foote is a spiritual intuitive healer whose passion is to empower her clients by connecting them to their authentic selves. She offers distance healing sessions, which incorporate Reiki healing combined with a chakra reading report, crystal healing, and oracle card reading. Her in-person sessions include all of that, plus hands-on Reiki, massage, and craniosacral therapy. I don't know about you, but this all sounds so delightful to me, so make sure you check out her offerings at moonmagicwellness.com.
Astrology is a language based on the names of the gods of Roman mythology. We often are encouraged to bring a mythic perspective to astrology as we take the names of the planets to represent their god forms, but it can be really daunting to know where to turn, what stories are important, what images pertain to each of these figures, and how do we weave that into an astrology reading, which is already quite complex. Join me beginning July 26th for a new class called Mythology for Astrologers, which will be a 4-week immersion into the exact stories, images, and sacred symbols of the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 7 traditional planets of your natal chart. You can find all information about registering for this course in the link in our show notes, and I can't wait to see you in class. I also, a side note, I realized that I said the artist was Marc Chagall before. It's Franz Marc, who was working with Kandinsky
How dare you?
and other writers. Sorry, friends. Franz Marc is the right guy.
That's okay. I called it the Python chapel rather than the pylon chapel. So we're both
doing it. We're doing
we're both getting things slightly off and then correcting ourselves, so we're forgiven by the world.
We're trying. Okay, so here's our listener symbol. And this comes as a dream narration. Not too long ago, I had a strange dream that felt so real. I was aboard a huge ferry that, despite its enormous size, was able to navigate rivers that meandered through the hilly landscapes, as well as through narrow canals like tight streets in big cities. The ferry could turn sharp corners and was not hindered by its size, until it reached open water. The waves, although not of considerable size, flipped the ferry onto its side, and it started to sink. The strange thing is that I refused to let it sink. It's like I had a moment of control in my dream, and the ferry suddenly emerged out of the ocean again and sailed on like nothing happened. Very interesting.
It's wild. I feel like, so, I think our last dream or symbol that we worked with is also water based. And we're in Cancer season now, so we're in the watery space. Yeah. I think that being in the water, right? We know that we're talking about the unconscious to some degree. And, I want to be a little careful with that because I don't know if it always has to symbolize that. And that's something I'm coming to terms with as we do this podcast, actually, is that I'm kind of exploring the multivalence of symbols, and realizing that we don't need to find a singular answer for what these symbols are about. That's not the point. So it can certainly be pointing to the unconscious. It could also be pointing to the flow of life itself, right? That we're in a like some kind of a river or a stream or a channel that feels like it's really progressing in a very steady way, and that we're gliding almost through it. That's kind of the image I get with the ferry on these narrow channels, and then making these sharp turns definitely feels like there's this question of control, the ability to control and to navigate things precisely without getting stuck or caught or needing to kind of wiggle through. There's this real sense of precision there. And then when we get into the open water where we don't have this grid that we're supposed to follow exactly, that's when the thing kind of tips over. That's when it doesn't have its stability. So that's the first kind of question that comes into my mind, of the tension in the dream between there being a formula, like a strict kind of like map that they're following, making these turns and being in this very sort of rigid path, this tight path. And then when things open up and when it's endlessly possible and when there's any direction to go and when it's open water, that's when the ferry, the vehicle, cannot hold its own. And of course it's opposite of what it would be in real life. A ferry or a boat would probably not do so great with 90-degree angles.
Yeah.
It would probably kind of bounce a little bit and there'd be a struggle there. It likes open water because when you're on a boat, it likes to kind of make big loops and it turns, and it's not doesn't like tight spaces. So those are the interesting things that I'm plucking out.
Yeah, those are really interesting. And I love what you're saying about water not always being about the unconscious. I think that's really powerful because we should not fall into rote expectations when it comes to the psyche's symbols. There are endless proliferations, as exemplified by our very meandering conversations about what symbols are doing and what they evoke. But going into the space of a symbol allows us to unlock what that is. So I really appreciated that you just said that. I think that what I noticed, was that in this sort of civilized realm, this metropolitan or urban environment where the ferry is navigating the streets and there is some structure to the navigation, kind of like what you're saying. It's okay, it's navigable, but as soon as there's no civilization, no recognizable life force of whatever humankind, you're in the wilds of things. And that feels like the unconscious to me. That feels
definitely
more like, yes, uncharted territory, literally. That is interesting. I also think it's funny. A ferry is specific, and maybe the boat seemed like a ferry and it was just a boat. I don't know. But a ferry has the job of carrying us between two different destinations in this like circular pattern. So I think that a ferry helps us get from a piece of land to another piece of land that's water locked or water surrounded. So there's this kind of like, we're traversing the unchartedness or the wildness, trying to get from one place to another in there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the ferry, it's specific in that its intention is to carry us across the water to get from land to land.
Yeah.
And
very Six of Wands, right?
Yes.
I mean, sorry, Six of Swords.
Yes, very Six. I totally know that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought you pictured when you said that. So I think that it makes sense in a city landscape that we're taking a ferry. It's almost like, okay, we're getting from this area to that area, but the ferry doesn't go into open water. That's not where it belongs either. So it makes sense that it
falters.
There's some that it can't function there. So one of the questions I would ask for you, listener, is the ferry, there's something about this vehicle being on the water. So it's not, you're not a bus or something. You're in this space where the ground is not solid beneath you. But it feels like the orientation is to go from one place to another place, to go from one safe, sturdy experience to another safe, sturdy experience. But it actually takes you out into the open. It actually takes you to somewhere where there's not this destination of, dry, hard land where you can have your ground. So that might be a little bit of the dream might be showing you that's kind of where you're headed right now. It could just be a mirroring of what's actually going on in your life. And the question is, how do you navigate that? And it sounds like the dream ego has some power here and just writes it, flips it right back onto its path. That to me is very curious. And I don't know why, but my initial reaction to it was suspicious. And I don't know why that was the reaction.
because the boat didn't sink, because the ferry did not sink.
Yeah, because the dream ego could just be like, nope, it's not doing it.
It defied the sink. Mm-hmm.
It defied the struggle of the boat not knowing what to do in the open water. Yeah. So little suspicion of that. That doesn't mean a bad thing or by any means. It could literally just be pointing to the ability to kind of right yourself and to find your steadiness again. But there's also a little voice in me that's kind of like, really?
Why don't you want to sink?
Yeah, do you really have that power? Like, what is that about? Is there a part of you that's just, there's almost like a denial of the reality of the struggle?
Yeah.
Of the like, where am I? What is this? How do I navigate this? And it's just like, nope, it's fine. We're just going to continue on as if we're not in the middle of the ocean. We're going to continue on as if we were still on this straight path. But of course, if you're going to cross real distance, then you kind of have to go into the open water. And so that's where I'm a little curious, and I'm curious about the nope. Have you ever played Exploding Kittens? Oh my God, kill me. This is how I'll get my husband to listen to the podcast. I'll tell him I mentioned Exploding Kittens.
I'm not a games guy, so I've not played Exploding Kittens.
So Exploding Kittens is a stupid little card game. It's very great when you don't know the people you're talking to, and it's like an icebreaker kind of thing, and it's just whatever. And so basically, it's kind of like there's a normal card game where you don't want to end up with a card that has the bomb kitten on it. It's like, it just has little images of cats on it, and you want to be the one to not get blown up by the bomb cat thing. So you're playing the cards. And so there's this card that's just called Nope. And so if someone's like, you have to draw 2 or whatever, and they give you that card, you can just put down Nope. And then if you have a nope, then you can put down nope on top of the nope.
Wow.
And you can just nope each other infinitely. And so that's kind of the thing I got of like when the boat is struggling and flipping over, and it's just like, I'm just putting down the nope and I'm not doing it. And so that's what I thought of. And it's just something to reflect on of, what was your feeling when that happened? I would imagine that you're probably scared of like, oh no, what's going on? But when you righted yourself, did you feel relieved? Did you feel a little bit like you got away with something that you weren't supposed to? I would be very curious about how the dream ego reacted to that outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I like that.
Okay, my cat is trying to climb me now, so that means it's time. Okay, enough.
She's been good.
No, it's Mowgli.
It's Mowgli. He's been good.
Yeah, he's not been so great. He took 2 seconds to remember who I was when I got back, then immediately bit me. And I was like, remember that, Mom? He love bites, and it's not nice.
It's very cute.
Yes. So I think we've had a very successful meandering of mountains.
Mm-hmm. Good hike.
We did a great hike. We crossed some mountain paths. We moved through some obstacles and ascended to heaven.
Good. We got there. Wonderful.
Okay, so absolutely check out Christina's class and leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And you can also definitely check out our Patreon and support us or get some goodies. And we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining our Patreon.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Christina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.